This podcast is for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice. Some topics may be sensitive. Please listen with care and seek support if needed.
Hi, I'm Crystal Park. Welcome to Season 2 of the Because She's Adopted podcast. Today we have Dr. Alana Berg with us. This is part 2 of our episode with Dr. Alana Berg. And today we're going to talk about stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stress.
What can you say about stress? I have a lot of it.
I've never experienced it.
Ever in your whole life?
No, truthfully. Yeah, we all have stress. Stress is not... Actually, one of the things I want to say, stress is not bad. Like, there's a lot of negative connotation to stress. Stress keeps us alive. So if we frame it from that perspective, it has a purpose. The problem is, most of us, myself included, we have too much of it, right? And stress comes in many forms. So then that's the other side of it, right? We think about stress is just when I'm in rush hour, or when I have a deadline, or I get in a fight with my partner. But stress is just being busy. Stress is exercise. Stress is lack of sleep. Stress is bright noise or bright light, loud noise. Stress is just your body's requirement to adapt. And so sitting to standing is a form of stress on your body. It's a minor stress, right? But your blood pressure has to adjust, right? Obviously, our body's equipped and deals with stress on a regular basis. And if we have about 50-50, body's pretty good. It's when we're in that 80-20, 90-10, that things are more compromised, right? And that's where I think, on the big picture of stress, the body physiologically, the way it responds to stress and what's maybe unique to humans over other animals, outside a number of, humanity, is the reality is that we can anticipate stress. So you don't see a zebra, out on the plains worrying about when the lion's going to come. It's either there or it's not there, right? We anticipate it. We can just think about something, so we don't actually have to be in the stressful mode for our body to respond with a stress response, which means we have a whole lot more opportunity to be stressed out because our body is always in the now. It's always in the present. So even if the thought is of something yesterday, but it is creating that same stress response, the body is actually having that stress response now. And the body in that way is going to behave the same if it was running away from a bear or a cougar. It's going to have that same physiological response, increase in our heart rate. We're going to shunt the blood away from the stomach. We're going to, move more blood to the brain so we can be more efficient and alert and aware if we need to fight or flight, right? So it's adaptive, it's to keep us alive, but we could just be sitting at our desk and having that same physiological response, but we're not actually running from anything, just in our head, right? And so the consequence of that happening on a regular basis is that inevitably we're shutting down what is considered non-essential for survival, but essential for life, functions like digestion, like reproduction, like sleep, like immune system. And so when that is a chronic case where we're constantly going into that sympathetic response, then the parasympathetic gets shut down. And again, that's when we're going to see long-term issues, what are some of the most common things that we start to see in our society? Metabolic issues, whether it's diabetes or hypothyroid or chronic fatigue, immune issues, sleep issues, digestive issues. It's a big one that I see a lot of, right? And it's because if the body's perceiving I'm about to become a lunch, I'm not going to worry about digesting my lunch, right? So all that blood is shunted away, so it kind of sits there and it's fermenting and can lead to a whole host of digestive issues again over time, right? It's the chronic stress that becomes more of the issue for us today than acute stress. Acute stress was necessary and good and kept us alive.
Do you think people get addicted to stress?
100%. I think there's a number of reasons why that actually happens. One is, I think, a cultural thing that we emphasize productivity, perfection, efficiency. I mean, it's, I would say, probably one of the most overprescribed medications are stimulants. And it's because we feel like we always need to be performing. I also think that sometimes that happens because of a life of trauma. So post-traumatic stress is where your body is still behaving right now as if that event way back then is happening now. So the body is making a connection to that. I think also it can even be, we somewhat can be hardwired for it. So if we grew up in a highly stressful home, or even in utero, mom was undergoing a lot of stress, that those hormones would have been more present to baby as they were developing, and the body can become more sensitized to that stress hormone and almost like used to having that amount of hormone. So naturally, if you grow up in an environment where, adoption is a really, I would say, a common scenario where there is always again, at that age, an unconscious level of stress, rejection, abandonment, that our bodies become habituated to it. And so they almost don't feel like themselves when they're in that state. And it can be hard to achieve the opposite, which is relaxation, right? So yeah, I do think, again, that can be something that has to really be addressed for people that have been, I see it all the time in my office where, yeah, we go through a stressful event and maybe a divorce or a death or a disease or something that's, causes a family or a person to go through a stressful time. But then we kind of come through it and the body can regulate. But if it's something where it's a habitual thing, they're always in a stressful job. Their relationship's always stressful. And they go for one relationship and the next relationship's stressful. There is something fundamentally in there where the body's probably quite adapted and adopted it as kind of normal.
I feel like as you're talking about stress, it has a direct correlation with the nervous system, obviously.
100%. Yes.
And I feel like my nervous system's been messed up for as long as I can remember. And I think you and I have chatted about this before, where I feel like whether I'm having really challenging things go on in my life or even really exciting things, like good things, it's almost like my system translates it the same.
Yeah.
It feels like stress. It feels like energy.
Well, and the reality is, like, excitement and nervousness are very similar, actually. It's really just perspective. But and it's important to understand too, when we talk about stress, there are two different pathways in the body. So there is our nervous system, which is that sympathetic nervous system, which if you think about it adaptively, it's the one that like immediately responds. So I gotta lift that car off that person, right? That's my sympathetic nervous system activating into overdrive so that I can respond very quickly. The secondary response is a hormonal response, and that's with cortisol. That comes from the adrenal glands. And that one is the one that creates a little bit more of a prolonged stress response. So it's not as quick. And hormonally, nervous system to hormones that transport like through the bloodstream, for us, we wouldn't necessarily notice a difference, but the nervous system is much faster. The hormonal system is a bit slower and lasts longer. Both are going to be relevant when we're talking about stress and chronic stress. What happens a lot of times is people, if they're in that high stress, they'll feel kind of that wired feeling, like their nervous system is always on edge. And I talk about it as it's like a hyper-adrenal state or a sympathetic overdrive, because often they are coming hand in hand, the hormonal and the nervous system, but it's kind of where the body is. The analogy is like you're just treading water, and as long as nobody adds another brick to your back, you're okay. But as soon as somebody does, it's like you're drowning. So it's like my stress tolerance is this big. I'm easily overwhelmed. Because I'm up here all the time, I'm not actually coming over ever into that parasympathetic relaxed state, which is where we let go and we recover and we heal, we sleep. And so the other side of it, in the chronic stress side, is where we then get to that burnout state. So it's not where we're tired and wired. Now we're tired and exhausted, right? And so that's when symptomatically we'll see people will, they have a hard time, like even exercising will make them feel worse. They wake up, they're exhausted. They have to push themselves all day long. Their sleep's often compromised because by the time they are going to sleep, their cortisol is too stimulated. They're looking for like caffeine or caffeinated drinks or being busy to kind of get them going because they just don't have the reserves because they've been pushing themselves for a long time.
What's the danger in taking stimulants like that when you are already functioning on a completely
Depleted
system?
I always use the analogy, it's kind of like taking a lemon and trying to squeeze the last drop out. I mean, the reality is that you will get to a point of burnout. Yeah. The body only has so much to give. And so that's usually when people get to like a flat line where then they develop something like, chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or, something where it doesn't matter if you try and stimulate the body is not going to respond anymore. And you'll start to see those symptoms physically, maybe in disease or, some other immune response. But the danger is that, on the surface, you might have energy, but underneath it, you're actually depleting yourself faster.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. It's as you're talking, I'm thinking about just my own journey with anxiety and depression, and I always look. It was presented to me like when I'd be in a season of anxiety, it was like I was this train that was, going up this mountain and, I was achieving and I was doing things and I was feeling productive. I mean, I was a little squirrely because I was very, very anxious, but that my brain and my nervous system couldn't exist in that state for that long. Right. And then I would come back down the other side and that would look like depression. Yep. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, if we aren't intentional about our rest,
100%,
our body is going to force rest on us.
That's often a question I ask people. What is the thing you need to do for yourself that you're maybe not acknowledging or not, or maybe you're tolerating or denying? And what would you have to do? What would your body have to do to get your attention? Do you want to wait till it gets to that bad? So your body will always get your attention. It's much better to do it on your terms and say, oh, I actually need rest right now. Then go so beyond that point where your body's like, well, you're not going to listen. I guess we got to get some rest somehow. Because like I said, then it's like you can't perform. You can't do the things or the responsibilities, which is, again, why these systems are always about the balance, right? We need to recognize that there is a time for rest and recovery, even on a day-to-day, but even seasons of our life. There's times that it's just like you said, where it's busy and maybe there's more times to be performing, and then equally, then there's a time for like, okay, I need to step back. I need to do more growing in here. I need to do more manifesting in here than maybe out here. And that has to include rest and recovery, right? Because we're human at the end of the day.
Yes.
And it has so much capacity.
So what would you say to somebody who has, let's say, chronic stress and they don't know how to deal with it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always look at, there's three sides to it. Obviously, initially, I think we always need to look at supporting our body physically. So yes, that means like adequate sleep and making sure we're sleeping, because sometimes sleep is not happening. So then what do we need to do? And obviously, ideally, I try and avoid a sleeping medication if we can. But supporting the body nutritionally, so making sure you're eating consistently. The adrenals love consistency. Eat at the same time, eat nutritious food, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, sleep in complete darkness. I also think, basic nutrients like B vitamins and vitamin C and magnesium, like we know those are things that are really important for the adrenal glands to recover. So getting the nutrition side supported, that can go a long way. There's also certain nutrients, if the cortisol's really high, where it's more that wired feeling, we need to get the nervous system under control. So we might use different remedies like phosphatidylserine or Relora or L-theanine. There's different kind of remedies that we'll use to try and kind of regulate the nervous system and the cortisol. So the first side is always, like I said, in all things, I want to support the body physically, right? Then we look at, okay, well, how do we start creating maybe outlets for that stress, right? How do we manage the stress, like you said? Maybe it's, carving out time for exercise and then recognizing what types of exercise we're doing, what time of the day are we doing it. Better if we're kind of dealing with stress to be exercising in the mornings, not at night before you're trying to go to sleep. To meditation, prayer, yoga, being out in nature, like all of those things that help manage the stress. The third thing that to me is probably the most important, probably the most powerful, is I always suggest that we have to get rid of the stress. And really that comes down to changing our circumstances or changing our perspective. I know that people want the magic pill, but the reality is that we have to be accountable for what's creating the stress in our life. And sometimes legitimately, we need to change our circumstances. Sometimes there's things we're tolerating that's not okay. Maybe there's an environment that we've just decided that's not an environment we can thrive in. And that's a personal decision everybody has to make. But I will always challenge people to look at your perspective. Otherwise, we're going to go through life constantly changing our circumstances, and obviously that's not healthy either. And so when I talk about perspective, what I mean is what makes stress, what makes something stressful for you is unique to you, right? You have a particular lens of how you look at the world, just like I do. And we could be in a similar situation and both be stressed, but what's making stress for you is different than what makes stress for me. Mm-hmm. And so in that perspective, we're really having to identify what are our triggers, right? Why am I feeling stressed in this situation, right? And that's, again, going to come down to our past experiences, our belief systems, the resources that we have. But it's very much looking at how am I choosing to see this? What do I actually have control over? And actually being honest with ourselves, like maybe we're taking something personally. It's not about us. Maybe we're making an assumption about a situation, but we actually don't really know if that's what's going on. Maybe we need to ask more questions. Maybe we have an expectation of a situation and we never actually shared what that expectation was, or maybe it's not a realistic expectation. Maybe the people in that situation actually can never give you what you want. So then if I am expecting something that somebody can't give me, who's the one with the issue, right? It's me if I'm the one getting upset about it. I have to decide if that's okay for me, but it's not fair to have an expectation of something that they can actually provide and then get upset about it, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm not setting a boundary. So maybe there's something that people keep, pushing my boundary or stepping over my boundary, but I'm not the one keeping it and saying, actually, that's the line I'm not willing to cross, right? This isn't respectful, or this isn't honoring, or whatever that looks like. And so often this comes down to relationship, because how we interact as humans is often the biggest trigger. And again, this goes back to our childhood. It goes back to how we relate to other people, and whether or not, I think I look at a lot of times, how often do we ask ourselves, why am I doing what am I doing? How am I showing up there? What is my part in it? We're very much always looking at what everybody else is doing. and how they're wronging us, or, you know, how they're participating in it. And I'm not going to suggest that they're, you know, in all circumstances, there probably is some responsibility in other people, but that's not in your control.
Yeah.
You know, there's books written from people who've, you know, lived through the worst circumstances, and it was all based on how they chose to live in those circumstances as to how it impacted them. And I think one of the things, especially on the topic of adoption, one of the things that I think comes up a lot around relationship, and I talk inevitably a lot about relationships in my office because of that. But in the case of where these perspectives come from, a lot of it is around how and if our needs were met as a child.
Yeah, no, I'm just so glad that you're going here, because, you know, I've posted about this, about, you know, a baby being born and maybe not being with the mother for a time. You know, I was not with anybody for 5 days in the hospital, and who took care of me? Were my needs being met?
Right.
Does that impact me as an adult?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, some people will say it's nonsense, but, you know, there's a whole community of adoptees that are living that out.
100%. Babies are emotional beings. They may not be able to verbalize. They don't have the cognitive ability to say, hey, this is my need. In fact, you know, it's not until adulthood that we really can do that. And even then, we're not so great at asking for having our needs met. But babies have emotional needs. They have practical needs, physical needs. And if the caregiver or a lack of caregiver isn't capable of showing up for them in the way that they need, that has impact. So I think a lot of what I talk about is the reality that we often think about as a child where our needs met, I think we're pretty good at talking about, and there's certainly more conversation around abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, a little bit around emotional abuse. But I think one of the things that's not talked a lot about is a neglect, what emotional neglect is. We talk about physical neglect, which obviously is a form of abuse, and that's not okay. And many people may not say, well, I don't have that story. I don't have an abusive past or even an adoption. Well, yeah, okay. The first few days I didn't have someone, but then I had a loving family that took care of me. But the reality is that it doesn't mean your emotional needs were always met. And that's not the child's fault. And this isn't just for adopted children or people, because obviously it affects us in our adulthood. If we grow up in an environment where our emotional needs aren't met, and the reason that happens is because a number of reasons. It could be because our parents are distracted. It could be because maybe someone else in the family is sick. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe there's been a death in the family. Maybe a sibling has high needs, and so the parents are very much focused on the other sibling. Maybe the parent is narcissistic or a perfectionist or a passive parent or authoritarian parent. There's many different ways that can manifest that aren't abusive in the sense that we think about it, but it results in emotional neglect. Because if a parent can't show up for you and say, I see you, your feelings matter to me, you're significant to me, which is what every human being wants, then we learn our needs don't matter. It makes me emotional because I see it every single day in my practice. And it's one of the things that I think if we don't get an opportunity to see our beautiful selves through the reflection of the adults around us, then we grow up thinking that that's not important, that's not significant. And we often end up then projecting out here. I'll look out here to see how I get that validation. So if I have to be perfect, I'll be perfect. If I have to be smart, I'll be smart. If I have to rebel, I'll rebel. If I have to be quiet, I'll be quiet. If I have to be loud, I'll be loud. The behavior isn't so much of the issue. The theme is that when I had a need, you weren't available to see my need. You weren't available to talk about it, help me through it, acknowledge it. Maybe even it's something as simple as you come home from a note from your teacher and you would, hit Johnny in the face or in the shins or something. And, obviously there might be a behavior that wasn't okay, but how a parent was able to see that and receive that, meaning if they were a distracted parent, they might not even acknowledge the note. If they were a passive parent, they might say, well, that kid probably deserved it. If it's an authoritarian parent, it might be like, you're grounded and you don't get to have a birthday. It's just extreme. If it's a perfectionist parent, it might be like, oh, you make us look so horrible. What does everyone going to think? Let's bake some cookies for the class and you can write a note to that little boy. If it's, like I said, either a divorced parent, an alcoholic parent, you might not even give them the note because maybe they're not available to it. Or you don't know what parent you're going to get. It's an alcoholic parent. And the reality is, what did you need in that moment? Hey, see me. What happened? What led you to the point where you would want to, hurt another kid? I could see that made you really frustrated, like validate the feeling, right? Oh, well, he was throwing spitballs at me all week and I just got so frustrated I kicked him. Okay, I could see that would make you upset. What could have been a better option? Well, I probably could have told the teacher. Yeah, absolutely. And there would be something, again, there might be a required behaviorally, correction of whatever that looks like, right? Age appropriate. But at the end of the day, if that happens consistently, you say, I'm important, my needs matter, my feelings matter, and I'm a valuable human. And if we don't get that, we will grow up believing that we're not. And then we start looking, like I said, for it out here. And so a lot of the stress then comes from we're not being our authentic selves. We're trying to fit a mold somewhere that somebody told us we were supposed to fit, that provides us love and acceptance, which often means self-sacrifice, self-compromise. And that doesn't ever feel good, right? So a lot of the stress, the perspective is actually looking at who am I and why is this making me stressful? And what do I need to heal and work through? Because the truth is you are valuable. You are worthy. You were born that way and nobody can change that. That's what God declared the moment he created you. So that's the truth. But then the world told us why we weren't. There's an interesting concept around attachment theory, and it's basically when we look at as humans, I think we're always kind of dancing between being ourself or being our authentic self and being in relationship or attaching, and it's a dance, right? So the reality is it's not all about us, and it's not all about someone else. But as a child, we will always choose attachment because our survival is based on it. So in order to be loved and accepted and valuable, and which every child wants, this becomes the priority because my safety, my needs being met is based on me attaching to this individual. And if they aren't evolved and healthy and capable, then often that means I have to self-repress, self-deny, self-sacrifice. I can't truly be me because they may not like it. And then they'll leave me, they'll reject me, and not a single human wants to feel rejected or abandoned. So we'll choose this over and over and over again, and then we become an adult and we're still doing this.
We're choosing attachment over authenticity, being our authentic selves.
Correct.
So from an adoptee's perspective, that resonates so deeply for me. A lot of adoptees talk about being a chameleon. And I think, even within the recovery circles, we talk a lot about being a chameleon. And I always thought that it was about performance and being who people needed us to be,
Right.
or filling that role. You know, a lot of adoptees were adopted to, you know, because the parents were infertile, and so they were the solution to the
Right.
infertility. And I know that's a harsh way to say it, but from an adoptee's perspective, that
Yeah.
you know, we feel that, right?
Yeah.
There's an expectation on us. And so, but when you say that we will always choose attachment over authenticity, then if we've always chose attachment and we've always been the chameleon, we grow up not actually knowing who we really truly are. We don't know our true authentic selves.
Right.
And then what do we do?
So talk about inner crisis stress. Yeah. It's a relearning. It's a lot of, when I think about healing, it's a relearning of who we are. And I say it's a dance because the truth is we are meant to be in relationship. We're not meant to be monks on a mountain that, you know, never interact with another human being. We're meant to be in relationship. That's the intention. We are our best selves with other people. But we have to figure out that space between loving ourselves and loving someone else meet. It's that intersection where you're allowed to be you and I'm allowed to be me, and we're choosing to share life together. Now, the problem is not every single person is going to have that space of, well, I respect that, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, the hard part is now that I've like self-sacrificed, I've compromised constantly, how do I start being myself? You know, how do I start being that authentic self? Well, the reality is it's going to be a little scary. It's going to be vulnerable because people may not like it. And so part of it is recognizing that that is a reality. It's a reality that by being yourself, it might cause tension in a relationship. It might cause people to not like it, and you might feel rejected, which is the very reason why you didn't want to be yourself in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's actually having to get comfortable with that tension, is that there are times I need to be me. I need to fully, express what I feel and what is true to me. And then there's times where I need to see you and I need to see your perspective. And when it's loving and honoring and integral, and I can feel that, I can see that, it's that meeting then and saying, okay, well, there's compromise here, because relationship is compromise, right? If we all over here, now it's selfish and narcissism, right? So it's a dance between the two, but again, it's a transition because depending on the environment we grew up in, if attachment was the requirement in order to be accepted, you will be a chameleon. You will not know who you are because your internal value and worth is dependent on it. And so it is an earthing to understand, where do I stand on that? Where do I get that value from? And again, if my needs weren't met emotionally, how do I start meeting them? Because that's the gift as an adult. As a child, we didn't know any better. And it wasn't our fault. We didn't get to choose whether or not our parents were capable or able. And at the end of the day, they did their best. But it is now as an adult saying, okay, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to change that? Well, first of all, who am I? And I know that's a big, daunting question. And you could sit there for a long time and try and answer it, but it's accumulation of, first of all, let's just start with, how do I feel? How do I feel on a regular basis? What are my needs? Oh, I'm thirsty. Oh, I don't even recognize when I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or just basic needs. Like, how do I start becoming aware that my needs matter, my feelings matter, and then how do I start processing those?
And sometimes it's difficult for those around you when you start realizing those things, because then there's a dynamic shift within the relationship.
Yes.
And it's a risky thing to be yourself. going back to that attachment piece, I'm just thinking, you feel like your survival and your safety depends on it.
Yeah.
And so how many times have I done things I didn't want to do just to be accepted?
Yeah.
Like things I really didn't want to do just to be accepted. And yeah, I'm just thinking, like, even within a marriage relationship, when one person starts saying, well, this is the need that I have,
Right.
it can be really tough for the other person because
sure.
there's this dynamic shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially when a lot of times relationships, especially as like a spousal relationship or an intimate relationship, we're often, initially bonded on our own relationship issues and traumas and dysfunction.
Right.
So because we learn all of that through our childhood, and then, the irony is the very thing that sometimes brings people together is the very thing that pushes them apart, because it's the thing that they were looking for validation, and then they become frustrated that why do I have to be that person? Or why do I have to be the fixer? Why do I have to be the broken?
I relate to that. Like crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Like when I met my husband, I was a single mom and in a very, very vulnerable, desperate state. And he loves to be the hero. And he came along and, rescued me. And then when I got strong, he didn't kind of know where his place was. As you're talking, I'm just thinking there was a time in my life where I had become friends with a lovely group of women that I admired deeply. And I knew that I could be myself with them. I knew that I could be my authentic self with them. And I would allow myself to do that. But then I'd go home and I'd have a complete panic attack that I was myself. And oh my gosh, what if they don't like it? What if they don't accept me? And I'd often either phone or text and like, I'm sorry if I said that. And I didn't need to do that. Yeah. I was the only one that was aware of that. I think that they were refreshed by the authenticity.
Yeah.
So,
and that's the reality too, is, you are going to attract people and circumstances and situations that reflect you. So it might feel uncomfortable. But like you said, if anything, it was refreshing. They were like, oh, thanks for the authenticity. And meaning you will start attracting people who want that. And so again, as you in your own journey, like maybe there's relationships that it's going to struggle. There's going to be some like, oh, this feels uncomfortable. And you might be frustrated. It's like, well, I'm changing, but my partner's not. Well, the truth is that they're not going to change because you're telling them to. They're going to change because you're changing, and they're required to change to be in relationship. Because when you start behaving differently, then there's an expectation of, but this is how we communicate, and this is what's okay and what's not okay.
What can somebody do today to begin the process of healing, maybe releasing?
Yeah. Honestly, it starts with the small things. So it's just willing to be curious about what it is that the body's trying to say, what it is about my perspectives that are, reflecting in how things are manifesting around me. I think it's just we're so judgmental with ourselves, right? If we're feeling whether it's a physical symptom or an emotional symptom, whether we're feeling angry or we're feeling, pain, we're so judgmental about it. We're like, I shouldn't feel that. So we're instantly trying to get out of the discomfort, make it go away, stuff it down, take something for it. But what if we were just willing to listen? And what if we were just willing to say, okay, you've got something to show me. I'm just going to pay attention. It may not be immediately that you're going to get all the answers, but it might just be like, oh, a memory comes out, a thought comes up, an unresolved issue. Maybe it brings you to something else that, oh yeah, I've been meaning, like we don't think in in conscious sentences. So it's a lot of randomness up here. But when we're actually intentional about, okay, like what's going on? And there's some curiosity. And sometimes if it's a physical symptom, like focus on the physical symptom. That's an easy segue to get into your body, is feel your body. Because you can't be anywhere else. You're not in the past or in the future if you're in your body feeling it. So start with that. Start with focusing on the body and just get curious with it and just see what happens. Observe it. Does something come up? And if it does come up, sit with that. Ask questions. Okay, are you here for a purpose? Is there something I need to understand? Is this even mine? Right? How do I need to let it go? Maybe it's part of a bigger picture. Oh, I'm feeling angry, but man, I've been angry a lot. Maybe there's more I need to dive in there. Maybe I need to talk to somebody about that. I think the more curious we are with ourselves and less judgmental, the more that we're going to get out of it, because we don't have preconceived ideas of it must be this, it must be that. And we need to be quiet to do that, right? When we're in this busy, distracted world all the time, we have to find spaces to be quiet so that we can have that perspective, so we can go inward, we can listen, maybe journal, we can pray, right? We need those times, not just to like chill out and relax, but also because it gives us space to actually start really looking at some of those big picture questions that we all have that, we're just not giving enough focus or attention to. Mm-hmm. Your body wants to be seen just like anything else, right? So if it wants to be heard, it wants to be acknowledged, just acknowledge it.
Yeah, you have me thinking about my back pain. Every once in a while, that same back pain will start to show up. And I know it sounds funny, but I'll say, I see you. Mm-hmm. I acknowledge you. Mm-hmm. It's okay. You don't have to do that. We're okay. Yes. Yeah. Like, I know, like,
yeah, I get it.
But it's trying to get my attention for something.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's such a really good tool, especially if it's something that you've kind of worked through, because you're recognizing, okay, there was a message there. And so, yeah, those things can come up again. We get distracted, we get busy, we push ourselves, we get into old habits. So if it starts saying, oh, I got to pay attention to that again, sometimes paying attention is enough and it can just shift. And other times there's more to it and we have to go deeper.
There's so much power in acknowledgement and validation.
100%.
Yeah. So where can people find you and where can they get your book?
So I do have a practice here in Kelowna. I'm fortunately and unfortunately quite busy in it, so I'm not always taking new patients, but I definitely love doing podcasts and interviews and talks. So sometimes with various things coming up, but my book you can find on Amazon. I also have it on audio version. So that's on Audible. And then I also have it on my website, Dr. Alana Berg. All my handles are actually Dr. Alana Berg. And on there you can get the book, but you can also, I have a course. So with that, there's a workbook that I give for free with the book. But I also put together a course where I actually walk people through kind of those specific questions of like, how do we get into like some of your limiting beliefs and, what does that team look like for you? And so we go through a lot of those kind of questions together in the course. So that's an option as well on the website.
Awesome. And I just want to say thank you, Alana, for being here today. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you for giving people the hope that they can heal, that it is possible. And thank you for being authentically you, because you're pretty special.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I love the work that you're doing. I love the conversations that you're having. And I know that there's a lot of people who are going to heal through it. Thank you. Thank you.